Welcome to another DragonLance Saga review episode. It is Majitog, New Cult the 14th. My name is Adam, and today I'm going to give you my review of Tyranny of Dragons by Wizards of the Coast and Kobold Press. I would like to take a moment, thank the DL Saga members, and invite you to consider becoming a member by visiting the link in the description below. You can even pick up DragonLance game materials using my affiliate links. Now, this is my perspective only, and that was crazy. I have no idea what just happened, but my internet just completely cut out on me. So that's what I get for not having done a review in a little while, right? Just the internet shits the bed on me. Okay, well, we're back. What was I saying? This is my perspective. I'm way late to the party of getting to Tyranny of Dragons. I know a lot of you have already played this multiple times, but this is new to me. And the way I'm doing it is new to me. It's probably going to be a little bit new to all of you. Now, I am going to be, of course, addressing the DL Nexus elephant in the room because they had already done a conversion, and I swear to you with everything within me, when I first started talking about this a year and a half ago, I did not know that they had already done a conversion with the same goal in mind of what mine was. It's just how our brains work with Dragonlance. And so as soon as I saw it, I was like, ah, shit, they already did the hard work. So let me look at what they did. And to be fair, I'm going to be talking about what they did. I am doing it slightly differently. And I'll talk about some touch points that are significantly different in what I'm going to do. But also, I don't want to spoil this for my players because the players that I have are this great group of 6 players that have never run this that I know of. And, so I'm going to be sort of giving you some basic information about this and then just sort of running down how I'm going to adapt it and some of the locations that I'm going to be featuring in it. So let's get into it. Chris, how you doing, man? You glad my internet and not yours? Yeah, no, I feel you. I get it. Oh, and if you have any thoughts about not only Tyranny of Dragons, but also Dragonlance Age of Mortals, or how you would modify Tyranny of Dragons for Dragonlance, put them in the chat. Let's have a conversation. This isn't like a pre-written review or anything. This is very free-form, so I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. So, Tyranny of Dragons is a compilation of Hoard of the Dragon Queen and the Rise of Tiamat. These are 2 separate adventures that were intended to be, of course, ultimately back-to-back. And when Kobold Press came in and combined them into this one Tyranny of Dragons supplement, they sanded the edges, so to speak. They made it fit a little bit better. I still think there's a bit of problems between the two because while the second half, the Rise of Tiamat, is wildly epic, the first half really isn't. And I don't know if it's just because I knew what was coming, but that first Hoard of the Dragon Queen is really just kind of dull. Like, genuinely dull. And the creatures that they have you facing off against are boring and dull. There's just nothing really epic about it. So I'm going to change that in mine, and I'll talk about it here briefly. But you like my take on tieflings? Good. Actually, I don't. If I'm being honest, I don't really care if other people like what I'm doing or not, but I do genuinely appreciate that you let me know that you care about it because I can't think of any other way. I mean, okay, you know what? I'm going to get to that in a second. I'm going to put a pin in the tiefling conversation because I have more to say about it. So thank you for making the comment there. This is released as this collection, as, Tyranny of Dragons, on January 17, 2023. But the reality is Hoard of the Dragon Queen was one of the first 5th edition modules to be released that wasn't in a starter set. So again, like I had mentioned, this has been around, I think that was like 2014 or something like that. It's been around for a very long time, like a decade. So it's, people know this module, people know the adventure. And that's why not only is it important to adjust it for Dragonlance, because this is a Dragonlance channel, obviously, but it's also important to change it up a little bit so that it feels fresh for those who might be watching it, who have already played through it or watched it played through already. It is designed to take players from 1st level to 15th level, and I'm going to actually be running this in or I am running this in Dungeons & Dragons 2024 edition. So this is the newest Dungeons & Dragons version, which is different than the 2014 or 2015 version of D&D 5th edition. There's small changes here and there. Ultimately, it's the same thing, but there are small changes, and not always for the better. But what are you going to do? That's how it works, right? Hey, Jason, thanks for tuning in, man. So it is inspired. I had seen an interview where some of the game designers were talking, and this was inspired because they wanted to do a sort of epic Dragonlance type story, type adventure. But at the time, they were only doing it for Forgotten Realms. They were only creating content for Forgotten Realms because that has become the default setting for 5th edition, which sucks because Forgotten Realms is garbage. Hot, smelly garbage. Especially compared, some people are going to be all butthurt about that, especially compared to Dragonlance. It's just a big mess of years and years of just dumping garbage. Now, a fair comparison can be made saying, well, isn't that what Dragonlance is with the 5th age and, the whole Age of Mortals stuff? And yeah, some people feel that way. And I'm not going to fault you if you do, because you have the right to feel however you want to feel about whatever you want to feel. I disagree. I think the end of the 5th age, and especially with where I'm going to end it up with this module, it's going to be not the best era, but it's going to be like the second best era to play, especially with modern editions of Dungeons and Dragons. So we know where it was inspired by, and basically the entirety of the story is there's this cult that is trying to bring Tiamat into the prime material plane, into Forgotten Realms. And it is the hero's job to navigate the myriad of factions and groups and organizations and cults in order to prevent that from happening. And that takes place, of course, from level 1 to level 15. And so it's a big, long campaign. Someone had made a comment in, I think it was in my first playthrough of Session 0, and they had said that they're really excited that I'm doing this in Dragonlance. It took them 3 years to get through. Sweet hell, if this takes me 3 years to get through, I'm not sure I'm going to have this channel anymore. Because Shadow of the Dragon Queen took 2 years. And I don't want to do that anymore. That is too long, and that's too much. So hopefully this won't take that long. I did take a couple breaks between and stuff because of frustrations and players dropping out and stuff like that. But I can't handle a 3-year campaign. I just can't. So we're going to put this on the fast track, and we're going to try to blow through it as quickly as possible. And if it takes a little over a year, fine. But not 3. Nuh-uh. No, sir. I can't do it. Ultimately, what you end up with is a interesting political intrigue game that this is ultimately designed to be. You're doing your best as players to improve your relationship with different factions so that they will ultimately help you when it comes time to face off against Tiamat and the bigwigs in the Cult of the Dragon. And that's where it is the most Dragonlance already. I mean, leading up to that, you can see elements you're like, oh, well, that would easily fit into Dragonlance. You could just swap out names and places here for Dragonlance locations, and it feels very intuitively Dragonlance. But that final act is very much the final act of the War of the Lance in the old DL modules. They blatantly ripped it off. I mean, like, embarrassingly bad ripped it off. And so the second half, the Rise of Tiamat section of this adventure, and it's a little less than half, but the last portion is very Dragonlance, and it's going to be epic, and it's going to be dope as hell, and I cannot wait to run players through it. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what Dragonlance Nexus did, because Ed McKeel, great guy. I didn't know his nickname was Rogue. I guess that's a thing. He had done a All right. I think I'm back again, but I have no idea. I don't know what's happening. So thank you guys for bearing with me as my internet shits the bed over and over again. All right, so they had already done a 5e conversion back when, in 2020. And Ed did a great job here because he talks about, and I'm just going to show some examples, the organization replacements that were set up for the Forgotten Realms that are going to be moving into the Dragonlance setting, and gives you a bunch of information. Now, he did a really great thing here that I really do appreciate. He gave a Taladas conversion and an Ansalon conversion. So, Taladas is the Time of the Dragon box set continent that is sort of northeast of Ansalon, one of the two continents on Krynn. And ultimately, Ansalon is the one I'm going to be playing with, but I love that he added in Taladas. I think that's great. All right, so I'm going to go over to the Ansalon one. And he suggests that the Cult of the Dragon ends up being the Dark Knights of Naraka. And I did a very similar thing, but in this era, the Dark Knights are fractured because after the Dragon Overlords came in and just started dominating the world, the Dark Knights sort of split up and sided with their own regional Dragon Overlord. And as soon as the Dragon Overlords, for the most part, were destroyed, they never reunified together because each of them wanted to be their own leader of the Dark Knights. And so I'm actually going to be using that for this. So the Cult of the Dragon is a splinter. It's an organization within the organization of the Dark Knights of Naraka. And it's going to be the division that is currently existing, or the organization within the Dark Knights organization that is currently in the Desolation. And they had already acquired the Abyssal Lance. So I'm going to be bringing Abyssal Lances into this. I'm going to be bringing Dragon Lances into this. I'm going to be bringing factions, multiple factions of Dark Knights into this with multiple groups everywhere. And that's why when I did the session 0 with the players, there was no, I was straight up. I was like, look, if you want to be evil, you can be evil, but you have to have a reason for being with the group and operating with the group. Because what I don't want to do is tell the players, no, you have to be good always in everything you do. I've done that, and it ends up feeling forced, and I feel like I'm punishing them when they don't live up to that expectation. Whereas in this particular case, I gave the option, and none of them chose evil. And I really like that, because ultimately, when you're running through as a hero, you have to make difficult moral choices, and they can be perceived as evil by some groups while you're making those decisions, because ultimately you can only save so many people. And so the people that aren't saved or the people that don't get your attention, they're definitely going to see you as evil, This is not your guys' internet. I'm sorry. This is mine 100%. If it goes out again, I will come back. I'm going to finish this review if it kills me. Hopefully it won't. Making no promises. All right, so the Red Wizards of Thay. Let me look at my notes for what I had. Okay, so this is in theirs. They say have that be black robes from the Orders of High Sorcery. I don't agree with that. The Orders of High Sorcery work together for the benefit of magic. And yes, there's a small faction of them working at the Blood Sea Tower of High Sorcery that is sort of separate from the Orders of High Sorcery. Ultimately, what I'm doing is another factional group. So for my game, the Cult of the Dragon is going to be... Ooh, you know what? I didn't pull up those notes. The Red Wizards of Thay are going to end up being Black Robe Wizards, former Knights of Takesis. So, the Knights of Takesis have 3 different orders. One's priestly, one's magic user, and one is warrior. And so, again, the Dark Knights are completely fractured in the absence of Takesis, and of course in their rise and bid for survival and dominance with the Dragon Overlords. And so that just creates this perfect opportunity for the presentation of infighting, which then lines up perfectly with the themes, the greater arcing themes of Dragonlance, which is evil feeds upon itself, it's the law of consequence. So this is a really great way of doubling down on that theme and still paying off truth to the historical experience of Dragonlance while converting this existing module. All right, so then the next one was giants. Well, there's giants in Dragonlance. I mean, all the way going back to the Choose Your Own Adventures, where the one Shadows over Nordmar, I think it was. Is that what it was? In any case, you run across giants in that. So giants will perpetually be there. I'm not going to convert them to the Ogres of Blood and Krynn as Nexus did. And the Harpers, they suggest Legion of Steel. I believe I do the exact same thing. Yeah, I think that's a great tie-in for the Harpers. The Order of the Gauntlet, they suggest the Holy Warriors of Kiri Jolith. That's a very obscure reference that's only in one trilogy of books. I wanted to do something, it was the Dark Disciple trilogy. I wanted to do something a little bit more like on the nose. And so I did the Order of the Gauntlet as the Knights of Solamnia. Because at this moment, the Knights of Solamnia and the Empire of Solamnia, I have not read those novels, so I might be speaking out of turn here. I'm just putting it out there. They're unified, but there's a little bit of dissension among the ranks because of aspirations the Emperor may have versus what the Order of Knights think should be done. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to split it up a little bit. So they have the Order of the Gauntlet as Holy Wars of Kiri Jolith. I have it as the Knights of Solamnia. They have the Emerald Enclave as Clerics and Druids of Chislev. Again, that's very isolated to a very disparate, non-organized group of individuals. I mean, Druids and Clerics of Chislev, they're not like this unified organization. So I want something that's a little bit more unified than that. So in my game, it's going to be probably the Elven Nation of Inath Wakenti. I like the idea. And ultimately, that's going to be a bridge for Porthios's attempts at bringing back Quillinesty. And so there's going to be this bridge between Porthios and the Quillinesty, the remnant Quillinesty elves, and the Elven Nation of Inath Watenki, or Wakenti, over in Kerr area. And both of those are going to be loosely connected and working together, and the heroes are going to have to be that bridge, which ultimately in the Fifth Age means that we have an opportunity to once again unite the Elven nations for good. You know, the Sylvanesty and the Quillinesty all together as one. Right now, most of them are already in Ithwakenti. Let's bring them all back together. So that's ultimately my goal, but that's going to be completely dependent on how the heroes engage these two different nations. All right, next. The Lord's Alliance, they have the Knights of Solamnia and the Empire of Solamnia. And this is where I went straight up. Lord's Alliance is just the Empire. So the Order of the Gauntlet is the knightly order of Solamnia, whereas the Lords of Alliance is basically a remnant faction of the Whitestone Council. That's how I'm going to be playing it up. And it should be a relatively interesting mix. People aren't going to be going too deep down the political, at least I don't suspect that they're going to be going too deep down the political spectrum of this, but I want to keep it loose enough that it can be referred to and understood so that when you do read the trilogy, you can sort of see how I, in the future, am applying these same principles, but finding a way of trying to get a semblance of unity, because ultimately, what I want to do after this, first of all, I want to do a Tolada's adventure series, but after that, I want to have the Minotaurs and the Solamnic Knights go toes. The two empires, the Empire of Solamnia and the Empire of Minotaurs, just battle it out for supremacy on Ansalon, and I think that will be a really great and interesting adventure as well. Okay, so the next one they have is the Zentarum, and they're using the Ergothian Merchant Marine. That doesn't really make sense to me, so I'm going to be doing another faction of Dark Knights. I like the idea of the disparate factions, as I already mentioned, and so I'm going to continue down that path. Metallic Dragons, of course, you know, they're from the Dragon Isles and stuff, and there's going to be some on Ansalon and some in Toladas and stuff like that, but ultimately it's still that same people. And then some of the other things, like the Arcane Brotherhood, I'm going to be using the Orders of High Sorcery. The Host Tower is the Order of High Sorcery. let's see. That's like one of the Wayreth Tower. And I think that's all the ones that I had called out here. And ultimately, it's just because I want this to be steeped in traditional Dragonlance conceptual motifs, right? Like, I want this to be good v evil. And then you're like, wait a minute. Well, the enemy of my enemy is my friend type situation that we all saw in Saturday morning cartoons growing up, whether it was G.I. Joe or He-Man or Thundercats or something. You always ran across those groups of bitter enemies having to work together for a common goal to stop some other greater threat or force or something. And so that's what I want to do with this idea. Now, ultimately, my goal is not, of course, Takhisis is dead. The Queen of Darkness was killed in the War of Souls. And this is well after that. At least, I think it's like 20 some odd years after that. So what I'm going to be focusing on is the resurrection of Takhisis and whether or not that resurrected Takhisis can become a god and whether or not she ends up dominating Krynn. And that's going to be up to the heroes' actions. So again, we're seeing parallels with the War of the Lance of the Dark Queen coming into Krynn. But in this case, I want to bring back the balance. I want to bring back the gods. So as soon as Takhisis is resurrected, assuming she is, assuming the heroes don't prevent that, which I will allow them the opportunity of doing, assuming that she's not resurrected, or I'm sorry, assuming she is resurrected, then the order of gods of good and neutrality will then bring back the walking god Valthanis as Paladine and raise him back up as the leader of the order of good of the gods, the pantheon of gods. And then together they will all face off and try with the heroes try to tamp down the now genuine threat of not only Takhisis being back, but also being a god again, because the gods of evil are going to either be working with the gods of neutrality and good or with Takhisis, depending on the particular god. And I'm not going to get into that until the very end of the campaign and, sort of calling out different ones on their own myriad of motivations and stuff. This is like an aspect of Dragonlance that I don't feel like has been explored as much as it really should. And Dark Disciple Trilogy did a pretty good job of addressing it. And that's that not every god of a order of good, evil, or neutrality, agrees with everyone else in their order. Or everyone else, or is in stark opposition to everyone else in other orders. There are a plethora of political and situational ties that these gods are going to have amongst each other and reasons for doing what they think is right for the balance of Krynn. And it's not always going to fall down good, neutral, or evil lines. And that's what I love so much about Dragonlance is that, yes, it can be a basic stripped down good versus evil game world, but it can also be as politically twisted up as you want it to be. And I find that really interesting when we can get into those sort of messy political alliances between not just the different organizations on Krynn, but also the gods themselves. So that's what I'm going to be bringing to it. So let's talk about some of the locations. Like, ultimately, I think Dragonlance Nexus did a really great job with some of the locations, starting with First Ward in Southland, Solamnia, to sort of stand in for Greenrest. And ultimately, it leads, if you don't know this is a pretty big spoiler, but it's an old module, so I'm going to bring it up anyway. If you don't want spoilers, GTFO. They, like the big end of this the first half of the adventure is a giant's, basically it's a flying citadel, but they call it Skyreach Castle. I'm going to have that citadel be the one that Tasselhoff Burrfoot crashed after having taken it over with the gnome in the Blue Ladies War in Legends Trilogy. It was crashed and sort of defunct in some random mountainous region of Solamnia. Giants took it over and with some Draconians actually raised it back up. And so there's warring factions on this actual flying citadel itself. And the heroes are going to have to try to navigate that And the great part about this is I already have the maps for it because Karen Wynn Fonstadt did the Atlas of the Dragonlance world, and she drew out a lot of the Flying Citadel. So I'm going to have all of that information there. And then I just think that's going to be a really beautiful tie-in. Ultimately, Dragonlance Nexus suggests that they do it was created by Draconians from Tear, but I like it a little bit better being a pure tie-in with an earlier era because we don't know what happened to that castle. All we know is Tasslev was like, I just landed it in someone's backyard. Like that was kind of basically it. So I want to bring it back, and I want it to have a prominent role in this campaign. So let's bring back as much real glorious Dragonlance lore as possible, especially if there's no answers to what happened to it. You know what I mean? So we're going to start in Southern Solemnia. We're going to end up hitting, and this is where I'm a little bit torn because ultimately, when it comes to the end of Rise of Tiamat, the end of this Tyranny of Dragons adventure, I want them to be in the underrealm of the Lords of Doom. Now, I don't want it to be the areas that have already been explored in the Lords of Doom through the different modules and stuff like that. I want this to be a deeper place because ultimately Dark Lady Mountain was the great volcano that all of the dragons came to and from. It was the portal to the abyss originally in old school Age of Dreams Dragonlance. And it's where all of the chromatic dragons entered and left Krynn to the abyss when they were called to the abyss. And then it exploded in the Second Dragon War when the dragon stones were thrown into it, and Takhisis sort of used her power, and that created the Lords of Doom. Dark Lady Mountain still has that portal that is unknown. Now, the question, why did Takhisis not use it in the War of the Lance? Well, it's because she had already set up the foundation stone, and quite frankly, it's probably something that she hadn't even thought about. It's been so long ago, and yes, she's a god and stuff, but I'm using conveniences and contrivances to make this a little bit more interesting and tying together eras of Dragonlance here. So we'll just pretend that she forgot about it, or it was in a state of disrepair that the portal wasn't operating properly, and so this new factional group that is known colloquially as the Cult of the Dragon, but is actually something far different. The heroes won't find that out until the very end of the first half of the adventure. And they won't know about the goals of them not trying to bring Takhisis back, but in fact trying to resurrect her. They won't know about that until the end of the adventure as well. So ultimately, it's going to be Dark Lady Mountain in the catacomb, the very deepest regions of that the final events are going to be taking place. And I just think that's a wonderful way to tie in not just the beginning of Dragonkind in Krynn in the Age of Dreams, but also the end of it. You know, like having the literal Dark Queen herself come back from the one place that she had entered originally from. I just like that sort of bookending of Dark Lady Mountain. So that's pretty cool. Ultimately, I think I'm going to be using the Calcus Mountains for the end where the Flying Citadel is going to be coming to and from, rather than the Garnet Mountains. I just don't like the idea that there's this massive cult operating openly right outside of a dwarven kingdom of Garnet, and they don't know about it. That seems silly to me. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to bring it much closer to some older school places. So maybe it's the ruins of Naraka, you know, that have been structurally rebuilt in some places, and that's the end location of the first half of the adventure. That would be a nice little tie-in, I think, rather than trying to just keep, like Raven Shadow Keep, for example, the hunting lodge is actually going to be the remnant ruins of the Temple of Naraka. So ultimately, we're going to be going from Solamnia. We're going to be going over the Carolized Mountains in Naraka. We're going to be heading all the way to Southern Ergoth. I'm not going to go to Ice Reach. We've done the Ice Reach thing in the original modules. I want to go to Southern Ergoth because in the 3.5 edition modules, I can't remember at this very second the name of the Dragon Overlord. Sleet? The White Dragon Overlord. I can't remember the name of it. But in any case, that Dragon Overlord was killed in the modules of 3.5 edition. So it's no longer there. And so the people who live there, when the Dragon Overlords had terraformed their regions, once they die, the regions slowly return to how they were before, but it takes a very long time. And since the white Dragon Overlord was one of the last ones to even be killed, then it's still heavy ice. So I'm going to be using that as a really great primary location. And then we're going to be going all the way up. We're going to be hitting Palanthas. We're going to be hitting for the Empire of Salamnia, sort of Whitestone Council type of moot, I guess you could call it. You're going to be hitting the Dragon Isles. We're going to be meeting some of the Legion of Steel up in the Dragon Isles area. We're going to be talking with some really old, ancient, good dragons who, engaged in some of the great battles of the War of the Lance. Trying to tie in as much as possible and make it as engaging as possible. I'm a little worried that people who don't know like deep lore are not going to get it, and so it's going to be time wasted on my part trying to make all these wonderful connections. But someone watching it might get it, and that's enough, you know what I mean, for me to feel good about it. Hey, Solid Combi, how you doing? I'm not going to be doing campaign prep videos. I'm sort of talking about that now. I've already started the campaign, so I'm going to be just rolling with it and just sort of, picking up my, I don't know, my kilt and running with it. And so from Southern Aragoth, we're going to be going to the Dragon Isles, and then we're going to have to deal with stuff happening over in Daragard region, because the Tower of High Sorcery is there, that's surrounded by all the undead. And this is something that they did mention in the DL Nexus conversion, which I thought was brilliant. And so I'm going to take it and run with it. And the Tower of High Sorcery is definitely going to be used. Now, here's the question, I think, for all of you watching. Would it be more interesting to do the Haunted Tower of High Sorcery in Daragard, the Daragard Mountain region, or do the Blood Sea Isle Tower of High Sorcery, the old Tower of Istar that's at the bottom of the Blood Sea that was raised in the Dark Disciple trilogy? Which one of those is more interesting? Let me know in the comments what you guys think. I think one would dramatically change that part of the module, and the other one wouldn't change it as much, but it would still have to change a little bit. But either of those two options is a great one. And then Dalamar, who has been ostracized from that Tower of Palanthas that was relocated during the War of Souls into Daragard region, he is going to be a heavy player at the end of this module, working with this sort of factional cult, but ultimately realizing that if Tikizis comes back, there's no love lost between them. So he's going to reach out to the heroes. And so we get a little bit of Dalamar, like old school Dalamar action. So I'm looking forward to that a lot too. So ultimately what I'm saying is this module on its own has some really wonderful epic elements in the later half. In the early half, in my opinion, not so much. It leaves a lot to be desired. But if you convert it all to Dragonlance and you play with times, like ages and connections throughout those ages and eras of Dragonlance, you can make this a truly epic experience. And that's my goal, is to make it a truly epic experience. And so I think this is going to be a pretty brilliant conversion when I'm done with it. It might shit the bed like my internet connection. I have to be honest. It's possible. It may be lost on everyone and just totally worthless. But I'm going to give it a go. And I'm hoping it's going to be worth your guys' time if you watch actual plays. And if you care about Dragonlance, then you might find some interesting notes. Like, for example, Mina is a god. She will be in this. Valthonis is a god. He will be in this. I mean, he's technically not a god. He's, the walking god. But he will, if Tikizis comes back resurrected, then Paladine will come back from Valthonis. So time travel is so intrinsic to the novels, so that would be cool for live plays too. I'm not actually going to do time travel in this. I'm just going to be using earlier age references because personally, I think the time travel trope is played out, especially after the last Destinies trilogy. I'm tired of time travel. I don't want to mess with it anymore. I'm done. So I'm just going to take this all into the Fifth Age as if the Destiny trilogy didn't exist and play it out that way. But I mean, you know, if people love time travel, that's cool too. All right, so what do you guys think about this? Let's see. Rod, how you doing? Thanks for tuning in. The worst part about Forgotten Realms is that Dragonlance would likely have been the default setting for Baldur's Gate, the D&D movie, everything. D&D, if not for them, you're not jealous or anything. I'm of the opinion where I don't want Dragonlance to be the standard setting. I like that it's a little bit off. It's a little bit different. It's a little bit obscure compared to the homogenized Forgotten Realms. That's what Dragonlance feels good to me about, is that it is very hyper specific. There are these themes of bigotry and sexism and racism and stuff that are inherent within the races, that the whole point of the adventures is that you get over those negative aspects of existence. I like that idea. And so if this was the default setting for Wizards of the Coast, they would have destroyed it. We saw what they tried to do with Shaz the Dragon Queen, and sweet hell, it was messed up. So in so many different ways. So I don't want them touching Dragonlance anymore. Like, full stop. I don't want any modules from Wizards of the Coast. I don't even like them messing with Dungeons and Dragons, period. I think they have homogenized Dungeons and Dragons so much that in their player's handbook, they say it doesn't matter if you follow the god's tenets. They'll still give you powers and spells. That is insane and stupid. The races are an afterthought, and they don't really have any actual impact on the game. That's ridiculous and stupid. Like, they've completely stripped away everything about this game that is interesting and difficult and made it as accessible to everyone possible. So yes, the game mechanics are super simple and can be taught to anyone, but the basic game itself sucks. And so that's why you have wonderful settings like Dragonlance, where you get to mess with Dungeons and Dragons and cater it to this really great setting where it does have meaning and matter, whether you're a specific race or not, or a specific class or not, or worship a specific god or not. Like, actions and choices and backgrounds have meaning in Dragonlance. If WotC made it the basic template, none of that would matter anymore. And I don't want that to happen to Dragonlance. So let's, us fans, take ownership of what we love and let WotC just bury their own business, because they're clearly not doing a good job right now. All right. Thanks, WotC. I don't mean to shit all over you guys, but, and individually, I'm sure you're very talented and very wonderful human beings. But as a corporation owning an IP like Dungeons and Dragons, you guys have shit the bed over and over and over again. You don't learn from your mistakes. You try to latch on to events of the moment rather than thinking about a game that is not supposed to be of the moment, but a fantasy world far away. Yeah, it drives me nuts. All right, so the next thought. Not familiar with Tyranny of Dragons, but the best modules to you have moral dilemmas, puzzles, timed events. Yeah, there's a bunch of that in this. A bunch of puzzles, bunch of dilemmas, bunch of timed events, factional political issues that you have to resolve as players. The biggest problem about setups like those is that you have to have players willing to go down those paths. And I don't want to make broad reaching statements about every player or anything like that, but it is a specific type of a player that is willing to go down those paths and dive into those minutiae of political factions. Not everyone wants to do that. Most D&D players, in my experience, want to run into a room, hack up a monster, and steal their treasure and go home. That's what they want to do. So when you start throwing in a ton of real challenging ideas and thoughts and behaviors and stuff, you lose players. Like, I mean, when I was just trying to do that with the DL2 Dragons of Flame, I almost lost the entire group in my attempt to add minutia. So not everyone is up for that. And you really have to be open about it. So I'm hoping that the players I have in this campaign are going to be willing to dive down that crazy road with me. But if not, then we'll just do our best to keep it as a sideline, but still, you know, play the way that they want to play and have some fun with it. All right, the stream was buffering because my internet dropped a dime on me. Wizards and Warp Drives, great name. Thanks for tuning in. Greetings from New Zealand. Hey, how you doing? I want to visit your country so desperately bad. Like, truly. Let's see. It's going to be awesome. Campaign prep videos coming. No. Time travel is intrinsic. Let's see. Just imagine playing a game like Elder Scrolls or Baldur's Gate in Dragonlance. Yeah, I think that'd be super cool to play. You have to agree about homogenization of D&D. It hurt the game so much. 100%. Same with all the options that you can do. There's been a lot of hubbub right now because one of the game designers shit on bonus actions. And Chris, you've actually made this comment as well. And I have to agree. All of the different types of actions that you can take slows down the game, especially when players don't think about what they want to do before their turn comes up. And there's a lot of, I don't know. What can I do? And, you know, stuff like that. That drags encounters out exponentially, and it sucks. So if you ever play in one of my games, please consider what you're going to do before your turn comes up. Please. You have to, let's see, you love to play a deep game like that. You realize your credibility is shot after playing 9-year-old senile vampire. Yeah, the amount of times that I've invited you to a game and you've declined tells me that you would not like to play in a deep game like that, if we're being honest. All right. I think Tyranny of Dragons on its own is good. You bring it into Dragonlance campaign setting, and it's great. You know, it's going to take a little bit of work, and by a little bit, I mean a shit ton, because because I'm doing it already. And it's taken me a long time to read through all this and sort of wrap my brain around some of the decisions I'm going to be making and locations and people and organizations and stuff. But I think I'm in a pretty good place right now, and I'm hoping that you guys will tune in and check it out, because I think it'll be a lot of fun. I really do. All right. That is going to do it for my review of Tyranny of Dragons by Wizards of the Coast and Kobold Press. What do you think of the combined adventure? Would you run it in Forgotten Realms or Dragonlance? And finally, if you did run it, would you run it in D&D 5 or D&D 2024? Feel free to email me at info@dlsaga.com and leave a comment below. I would like to take a moment and remind you to subscribe to this YouTube channel, ring the bell to get notified about upcoming videos, and click the like button. This all goes to help other Dragonlance fans learn about this channel and its content. And I also want to give a quick shout out and let you know about my new project. I have been developing a system-agnostic dark fantasy campaign setting called Direlands. You can learn more about it on my EVA Live Play YouTube channel. The link is in the description below. This channel is all about celebrating the wonderful world of the DragonLance Saga, so thank you so very much for joining in that celebration. So, until next time, for DragonLance Saga, my name is Adam. Slanjavar.